Hi, I'm Robert Rodriguez from Temple, Texas, and this is my build of North Africa 1941. What this mock is the siege of Tobruk in mid to late 1941, where the Germans are trying to take over Tobruk from the Australians, New Zealanders, and the Indians from India, of course. They were trapped. The Allied forces were actually trapped in in Tobruk, and what happened was the German forces were chasing the British back to Egypt, and they basically surrounded Tobruk because it's like on an isthmus or something like that. I can't remember how to say that. But anyway, so what I depicted here was a big battle scene with German armor and half-tracks. I also had Italian forces on one side and German forces on the other side. And they're also basically trying to attack the city itself and have a lot of destructed buildings or buildings that were basically crushed with all kinds of attacks and such. And also had British forces or all the Allied forces in pillboxes. Those forces were actually nicknamed the Rats because instead of having like fighting positions, they dug themselves into holes, and the Germans called them rats. And so they would come out of the holes to fight and then go back in to protect themselves. So what I wanted to do was kind of lay out the display to where it's big enough to have the vehicles more spread out because the desert is wide open. And the Italians, when they occupied the city itself before, they had built tank traps, and I didn't build the exact tank traps that they had. I had to replicate some and then put some barbed wire. But outside of that, it was pretty wide open, and it was up to the Germans to really storm the area or storm the town, but they just didn't storm the town. They would attack in groups, I guess, in single points, but not all at the same time. Had they attacked all at the same time, they would have easily overrun the city. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating history there. So you mentioned some of the different sides on the battle. If you can maybe take a closer look at the minifigs here and show the different styles of soldiers we have on each side.
Sure. Right in front of us are the Italian figures. Unfortunately, they didn't have like Italian weapons like Brick Arms, or any of the companies didn't have Italian weapons. So I used a lot of German equipment and such, but I made them distinct where all the equipment was black on their uniforms. But one of the things is I cannot pronounce the soldiers' names, but they had these interesting feathers that they would wear on their helmets. And then on the pith helmets, it was interesting because they had bigger feathers. And so, yeah, it was kind of crazy on that kind of stuff. And so I had a few soldiers. One of the things about the reason the Germans were in North Africa was really to save the Italians, because the Italians bit off more than they could chew, basically. Had they kind of like stayed within their areas, they probably would have still been in North Africa. But when the Italians got more aggressive, the British had to protect their friends over there, like the Egyptians and such. And so that's what they did. Over here on the other side are the primary German forces and their standard Desert Africa Corps. And this is right before Rommel came into play. So I don't have Rommel displayed. I actually brought him, but I just don't have him displayed. And as you can see, I have a destroyed Panzer IV, but the Panzer IV from Brickmania, where I got this design from, was a Panzer IV Offensive F, and this is an Offensive B, which was what was on site in Tobruk. So I had to change the barrel. Basically, I changed the barrel and a few other minor details, but outside of that, it's a standard Panzer IV. Have half tracks. The barbed wire is simulated by chains. I know there's a lot of different styles of chains, and I just want to made it simple so that way it's easier to build.
Yeah, it's a good technique though. I always think the chains are a nice way to kind of definitely give that effect of the barbed wire look.
Right. And so I just use techniques that I've seen from different people, etc. And because I made the bases so thin, I couldn't make like little rat caves for the soldiers. So I just improvised and just built up a little bit of rock formations, etc. And then the town, I really liked the town because I actually built the buildings complete, but it was harder to make them destructed or destroyed, for lack of a better term, and it's just the way it was. So I got a kick out of it, and then I also had to cobble the streets, and so that's how I did that with a lot of round light gray tiles, round tiles, and dark red tiles, just to throw a little bit of color in there. But outside of that, it was just straight building and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And took about 10 months over time just to build it. And they're on 12 base plates, 4 by 3, 15-inch base plates.
Yeah, well, it's a great looking layout here. I think this is a fascinating part of history to build with Lego. You don't see a lot of, this part of the world, during World War II built the North Africa campaign. So I think it's a really cool build here. So thanks so much for taking us through it.
No worries. Thank you.